Hi, thanks for coming. It's really great to see so many of you here to hear Rosanna tonight. And I want to thank the Logan Foundation for making this series possible, and Bill, Michael, and Lee Fagan for doing everything to make everything work smoothly around this series. I also want to mention that tomorrow, Rosanna will be giving a lecture at 1 o'clock, and that's open to the public, so you're all very welcome to join us at 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon in Midway Studios 108, right next door. The subject of her talk will be Lines of Sight, the Poetry of Vision, so please do join us for that. You are dead, therefore I write to you. I am dead, therefore I write to you. These lines from the notebooks of the understudied French poet Anne Vervain appear, translated into English, in Rosanna Warren's latest collection of poetry, Ghost in a Red Hat. Vervain, Warren informs us, was born in 1965 in the village of Magagnosc. She attended lycée but never studied at the university, making a modest living as a typographer and book designer in Paris until her mysterious disappearance while hitchhiking through Uzbekistan in August of 2000. At present, according to Warren's notes, Vervain is presumed to be either kidnapped or dead. But Anne Vervain is also a fiction, a persona invented by Warren to explore the possibilities of poetic expression, of literary translation, and of imaginative identification with others, both speculative and real. Her creator is a lyric poet, but a sly one who knows that pessoa means person in Portuguese, and that vervain is a flowering plant, more commonly known as verbena, valued in the cultivation of butterflies and hummingbirds, and celebrated as a remedy for incantatory spells and other forms of witchcraft. In other words, Warren is a writer who believes in the alchemical transmutations of poetry, but she also understands the misuses of enchantment. Over my garden table, the sun casts a shadow lattice of ilex leaves, an open weave that trembles across books and notebook pages, rearranging the words, she writes. But then she adds, just as well, they were not the best words. I'm willing to be rewritten and let the printed poems of others be rewritten as well. Warren makes an art of her openness to revision, her awareness of identity's provisional nature, her conviction that we are all both shadow lattice and an open weave that trembles across books and notebook pages, rearranging the words. In the poem she's written in honor of this evening, Warren recalls looking for the lunar eclipse one night in Midtown Manhattan, but only glimpsing the celestial event after giving up on the prospect. Only when we headed home did she appear, rusted, a trace of menstrual red, half erased in her own ghostly blood, like the scraps of poems tacked to the screen porch wall of the summer cottage. Warren's work alerts us to the beauty of Eclipse in its various forms. The disappearance of identity in the rapture of translation, revisions to the self made by a fretwork of ilex leaves, or the moon suspended over it all, half erased in her own ghostly blood. Not erased entirely, mind you, but half erased, bloody and spectral, and all the more luminous for it. Rosanna Warren is the Hannah Holborn Gray Distinguished Service Professor in the Committee on Social Thought at the University of Chicago. She's the author of 4 books of poetry, most recently Departure and Ghost in a Red Hat, and a book of criticism, Fables of the Self, Studies in Lyric Poetry. She is the recipient of awards from the Academy of American Poets, the American Academy of Arts and Letters, the Lila Wallace Foundation, and the Guggenheim Foundation, among others. Warren has also served as a chancellor of the Academy of American Poets from 1999 to 2005, and is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Letters. Please join me in welcoming Rosanna Warren.
Well, that was a generous and elegant introduction. Thank you. I feel very spoiled. And I want to thank the Logan Center and Bill Michael and Lee Fagan and all of you. This is such, I have to say, this has been a rather blissful experience coming to the University of Chicago. So I'll read some poems. And I'll start with a poem that was commissioned by the Logan Foundation, with my gratitude to the Reva and David Logan Foundation and to the Logan family. Eclipse. When we went looking for that eclipse of the moon in mid-Manhattan, we turned, dazzled by silhouettes of towers, and thought the moon was swallowed by hulking walls. And only when we headed home did she appear, rusted, a trace of menstrual red, half erased in her own ghostly blood, like the scraps of poems tacked to the screen porch wall of the summer cottage. After a winter of snow, wind, and rain lash, they delivered themselves shyly, ink muted, letters drained of sense. In phantom script, still Helderlin whispered, God is near and hard to grasp, but where danger rises, grows what saves. But what did we know of saving? I'm going to start reading some poems from The Ghost in a Red Hat and then some new work. The poems in this book have I hope you'll find, quite various tones and various preoccupations, so I've tried to design my choices to give you a sense of the variations. You may even find it a bit jolting, moving from poem to poem. I grew up partly in the south of France, and some of these poems recall those landscapes. Mediterranean. When she disappeared on the path ahead of me, I leaned against a twisted oak. All I saw was evening light where she had been, gold dust light, where a moment before, and 38 years before that, my substantial mother strode before me in straw hat, bathing suit, and loose flapping shirt. Every summer afternoon, her knapsack light across her back, her step in sandals firm on the stony path as we returned from the beach. And I mulled small rebellions and observed the dwarfish cork trees with their pocky bark, the wind-wrestled oaks with arms akimbo, while shafts of sea light stabbed down between the trunks. There was something I wanted to say at the age of 12, some question she hadn't answered. And yesterday, so clearly seeing her pace before me, it rose again to the tip of my tongue. And the mystery was not that she walked there 10 years after her death, but that she vanished and let twilight take her place. And this is another of those French poems from the south of France. There's a fierce wind called the Mistral, which comes down from the north and slams all the shutters and makes people crazy. So this is a Mistral poem. In this little harbor where we lived some of the summers of my childhood, boats would be torn loose from their moorings and dashed to pieces on the rocks when the Mistral came. Mistral 1. 2 donkeys graze in a meadow of wild golden buttons. Scents of eucalyptus and honeysuckle mingle in morning air. Distantly, down at the shore, rise the voices of children discovering things. Childhood burned with a long wick. I have returned here to examine the ashes. The gulls lament some tedious, age-old woe as they skim off toward the harbor, while the sun bores into and into the petaled whorls of the golden flowers like radiation, the whole meadow bristling with a heat that destroys and sustains. This doesn't matter to the donkeys who munch on regardless. Over my garden table, the sun casts a shadow lattice of ilex leaves, an open weave that trembles across books and notebook pages, rearranging the words. Just as well. They were not the best words. I am willing to be rewritten, and let the printed poems of others be rewritten as well, and let them steep in the bitter smell of eucalyptus, which is said to heal. And may the dark fire far away, charring my friend's hurt cells, complete its work. Let him grow into his longer story, the good one, the one in which sunlight runs in the veins with the force of summer, and children find some new thing and shout at the sea. And this is a very different sort of poem. If it seems confusing to you, that's as it should be, because the topic is, or the concern is schizophrenia, and which is hard to understand, I think, for people both inside of it and outside of it. Fear. I follow, trying to pick up scraps of the poem as you drop them, you hide them, but they rustle. I pry them out from under cushions, under the bed. I pluck them like beaded curtain strings from the whoosh of water in the shower where you pretend to wash when you are no one. No one is afraid of water. No one carves the soap so it won't touch his skin. It's the throb and splatter of water that drums the color out of each day. Good day, hello, hollow, spider fingers, sunken eyes, anti-soap for anti-matter. You look out from a burned out star, light years away, still emitting photons with that appealing, deep, affectionate dog's look of frightful understanding, a magic cloak of smell. No one will touch. No one is safe. No one plays golf with interstellar swings so the ball never lands. TV keeps reciting the right spell day and night. The door is sealed shut with masking tape. Daylight strips human skin like acid. As long as the danger lived outside me, I couldn't write it wants to crawl through the keyhole, slide over the windowsill. It breathes in the shirts hanging in the closet. It rots the cheese. It lives in my breath. It hides in the pages of the poems of Paul Verlaine like a smear of shit. It has signed a contract in ink squeezed from stars. You are the gentlest prayer. You see where the shadow falls across each eye. Of course, of curse, song of all our days. You were empty, so I drew a shrine, and it stayed empty. Some of the poems in this book, there's a sequence that are elegies for my friend, the writer, poet and nonfiction writer, Deborah Tall. And this is one of those poems for her. It has an epigraph from one of her poems. Aftermath. Dawn, the moment it was over. Deborah Tall. It was that last euphoric summer between one chemo and another, when you looked out your kitchen window and saw the doe standing at the edge of your lawn where the thicket gathers, autumn olive, buckthorn, forsythia, dogwood. And when you stepped outside, the doe stayed still and looked in your eyes, you thought, with a companionable, complicit question, and didn't run. You were lightheaded. The doe lowered her nose to shove at the small bundle at her feet, folded up like an awkward deck chair, till then invisible in its hollow of grass. She had just given birth. The fawn couldn't stand, but raised its too large head to gaze at you. You were, as you said, already more or less posthumous. You took each other in, one of you before, the other beyond fear. Two creatures, side effects on one another, headed in opposite directions. And for a great swing of contrast, this poem, Porta Porta, I will just say that it pretends to be about the flea market in Rome, Porta Porta, but I tell my Italian friends it's really about Wall Street. And I was sort of proud that I wrote this poem in the summer of 2008, before Wall Street blew up. Not that I'm any economist, but things looked weird. Porta Porta. If it once gleamed, if it ticked, if it buzzed, if it oiled eternal youth, if it whispered on an old tape with the sexual lure of infinite cash, if it said, I am your private castle and you are a queen, if it lit 1,000 bulbs, if it shaved 1,000 hairs, if it declared, God loves you, if it promised to cure hair lips, eczema, scabies, rage, if it clipped hangnails, if it delivered proverbs, if it hugged the ass, it's laid out on a collapsible table, on a mat, on asphalt. Money will change hands. Money will change us all. Change gypsies, professors, Nigerian whores, limping children, drugged babies, iPodded teens, Somali refugees, artists in drag, illegal Albanians, cruising Poles. We said one world. We said, isn't my money good enough for you? Switchblade, switch banks, the Cloaca Maxima accepts all currencies. The Tiber leaks yellow between its legs, venereal, venerable, duty-free, luxurious, silken, rippling, classical waves, sold and soldered, solved, reflected here. I read that once in Manhattan, and afterwards, a gentleman came up, and I learned afterwards that he was a banker. He said, you don't understand money. And I said, I think I do. Anyway, all right. This poem, Fire, is concerned with, in that perilous phrase, Baghdad, and especially Mutanabi Street, the street of booksellers. Fire. It would take a voodoo skull, one eye darkened, one candle lit, to see into these pictures. Who set that fire? Who piled that cliff of smoke? The newsprint is jaundiced, ripped at the edge. I set that fire. I piled that bombastic, mountaining smoke. I mound it up every night, and I don't drag anyone out. The bodies are stiff like little T-squares. It's not clear what geometry problem they solve. The ditch is a rampart. The live ones, turbaned, stand on the upper rim. Bombed trucks burn rectangularly. The books on Watanabe Street make a chunky oatmeal mush. This world, the same for all, was shaped by no god or man, but always was and will be an everlasting fire, said Heraclitus. And the child in the charred room reaches out to touch the wall. The furniture's burned, his father's shot, the mirror reflects only the camera flash. We found fire in our souls before we stole it from heaven. Now we are the lords of light, and the dark room is ours. As you can begin to see, this is a book that combines poems that are sort of fictively, at least autobiographical and personal, lyric, and other poems that have more public concerns. I don't think it's possible entirely to separate them. Here's a North American landscape. Man in stream. You stand in the brook, mud smearing your forearms, a bloodied mosquito on your brow, your yellow t-shirt dampened to your chest as the current flees between your legs, amber, verdigris, unraveling today's story, last night's travail. You stare at the father beaver, eye to eye, but he outstares you, you who trespass in his world, who have, however unwilling, yanked out his fort, stick by tooth-gnarled, mud-clabbered stick, though you whistle vespers to the wood thrush and trace flame flicker in the grain of yellow birch. Death outpaces us. Upended roots of fallen trees still cling to moss-furred granite. Lichen smolders on wood rot, fungus trails in wisps. I wanted a day with cracks to let the godlight in. The forest is always a nocturne, but it gleams. The birch tree tosses its change from palm to palm. And we who unmake are ourselves unmade. If we know, if only we know, how to give ourselves in this untendered light. Let's see. The Latch. After scraping 83-year-old paint from 4 screw heads, holding the latch in place on the studio door, and having steadied the door on one outthrust hip and running the pointed tip of a kitchen knife around the lockbox to break the seal of paint, your neighbor patiently removed each screw with the right size, old-fashioned screwdriver he had brought, and jiggled the lock free so he could pry open its metal back and fish out the broken spring, the small, dark steel coil and its detached tongue, which could be replaced, he thought, by an antiquarian locksmith on the other side of town in La Rue du Coureau, though the latch will be too late to keep in or out the man who abandoned this house and the good and ill spirits he courted here. Oranges. Sleeping on the balcony floor in Crete one night, I woke to see the silhouette of the roof slide over and mask the one glass-glint star. The stone house shuddered. The balcony twitched under my sleeping bag like a horse gathering to buck its rider. But the roof shimmied back into place and revealed the star. A clay tile fell, then quiet. Unlike the story a prisoner told once about the hole in his poem. It was in a bar. One minute he was standing there, and the next he was on the floor bleeding, which was everything his poem hadn't said. The other man died. That season in Crete, I was looking for the hole in everything I knew. I'd rise at dawn, pack Augustine's Confessions and oranges, take the bus out of town to hike the high pastures and goat paths and sleep on the ground to the tolling of sheep bells. I thought the stars would tell me a truth. The stones were hard under my back. A sheep tiptoed up and breathed on my face. I had nothing yet to confess. God was a large idea and awfully far. By dawn, the stars had paled, and I woke stiff, hungry, and elated, and hiked 8 hours down the gorge into a story I did not yet know. So now I'll read some new poems. This is the poem I'm about to read, The Triumph of Death. It's dedicated to Mary Sidney, the Countess of Pembroke, one of my favorite English poets from the 16th century, and I don't think she's enough read. And I usually don't read this in public, but I thought at the University of Chicago, people will go for Mary Sidney, or at least they'll know who she is. And they won't hate the Renaissance or the 16th century in England, which is a fantastic century for poetry. I should say, she translated, with her brother, Sir Philip Sidney, translated the Psalms. And to me, the Sidney Psalms is one of the great books of English versification. It has an amazing range of metrical forms. They were so experimental, and a lot of them are Mary Sidney's work. She carried it on after Philip's death. And she also translated Petrarch. And so the title of this poem, my poem, The Triumph of Death, is the Petrarchan title from the work that she translated. The Triumph of Death, to Mary Sidney. In your lace ruff, you resemble a giant snowflake or a spider web pearled with dew. What poets you catch in your symmetries at your long table at Wilton. What wits Spencer, Fulk Greville, Drayton pitch into the roasted piglet, stewed apples, carp. If you roused God up, he knocked you back on your heels, lady. O God, why hast thou thus repulsed and scattered us? Through the high windows at Wilton seethe rumors of battle, Philip's pussing thigh, death in the lowlands, mother wrong, daughter strife, stalk the cities. Still, you keep house with grammar. You salt the psalms for long preserving, as smoke in wind, as wax at fire doth waste, the unjust dissolve. Your stanzas stay, still sting the tongue. Dawn finds you kneeling on stone, calling again the bleak God you believe will answer you. You mix medicines, you write in invisible ink. But time trumps fame, which undoes death, which masters chastity and love, which leaves eternity, your master wrote, master of all. And like your lace, your lines shine not pale, but whitely and more whitely pure than snow on windless hill that flaking falls, as one whom labor did to rest allure. Translate us too, rough line by line, into your crystalline, severe design. Now, this is going to be a different tone. It's dedicated to the pop singer Marianne Faithfull, who is not exactly Mary Sidney. An epigraph from Faithfull. Away. The whole trick of the thing is to get out of your own light. Marianne Faithfull. She said she sang very close to the mic to change the space, and I changed the space by striding down the Boulevard Raspail at dusk in tight jeans until an Algerian engineer plucked the pen from my back pocket. As if you're inside my head and you're hearing the song from in there. He came from the desert, I came from green suburbs. We understood nothing of one another over glasses of metallic red wine. I was playing girl. He played man. Several plots were afoot, all misfiring. One had to do with my skimpy black shirt and light hair, his broad shoulders, and hunger after months on an oil rig. Another was untranslatable. Apollinaire burned his fingers on June's smoldering lyre, but I had lost my pen. The engineer read only construction manuals. His room was dim and narrow, and no, the story didn't slide that way, though there are many ways to throw oneself away. One singer did it by living by a broken wall until she shredded her voice, but still she offered each song, she said, like an Appalachian artifact. Like trash along the riverbank, chafing at the quay, plastic bottles, a torn shirt, fractured dolls, through which the current chortles an intimate tune. Graffiti. Kitty goes commando and the Goldman rats phooey. That blue scaffolding holds up the sky. Who did we think we were padlocking in or out? Give me that huge looping black script no one can read, a secret glyph, and just where someone has smashed the window, Jesus, the way, the truth, the life, and a dented aluminum frame. He bent down, we know, and wrote something illegible on the ground. A toothy black and white dinosaur gapes. I like the crack in this wall of monsters where skylines topple and ogres twiddle train tracks in their claws like pipe cleaners. Down the long, semi-abandoned street in Queens, calligraphy gallops toward the shop, displaying, like guitar strings, 7 different iron rods for gates. Hole in the wall, rose sound hole, ribbed sounding board, always from fissures and gaps some melody strains as trains thunder clank across the girdered overpass. A siren keens and a solitary man ambles past amputated acacias, fisting out with leaves. My poems are getting uglier. Rats. As if you rose out of your coffin, as if my heart was your coffin, you rose yesterday in the turquoise faceted light of syringes, hospital sheets, and toxic Niagara mist. You painted into a glossy forever. I felt again your weight upon me that Manhattan night in our quasi-childhood. You moved lovelessly upon me, almost angry. Anger I almost allowed myself to know, as we lay on a borrowed floor trying to make what might be called love. You broke each spell, the way Proust discovered love in captured rats squealing as the hat pin probed their vital organs. I was a slow student. I learned dumbly, blindly, and graduated to my own destructions. The white rats scamper through your landscapes of pill bottles and blood, chopped trees and massacred Adirondack deer. And I dream of knocking all the books off my shelf so that in the light breaking from those pages, I might behold, not hold, your broken face. I spend parts of my summers in France, not exactly where I partly grew up, which is over in Grasse, but further to the west in the Languedoc. Anyway, so some of these new poems come from being in France, and it's not a tourist France. It's a suffering country, a lot of unemployment, a lot of homeless people, and anger. The jargon term, the bureaucratic jargon term for homeless people is SDF, sans domicile fixe, without fixed abode. There's a new tribe of them appearing, at least new to me in the last few years, tend to be younger people. They're not gypsies, and they're not the old clochards. They're wearing mostly dreadlocks and kind of battle fatigues, and go in groups, and sometimes have pretty ferocious-looking dogs. Sans domicile fixe. Clouds like boulders. Boulders like petrified clouds that rolled down and stalled in the meadow. That was yesterday. Now we're in the centripetal apartment with peonies aging in 2 vases, pink and cream petals frizzling into crepe. Mirrors multiply the years. I see you seeing me in the gilt-framed oval by the desk. I see us both in the window reflected in the closet door glass. My eye corners crease. Flecks of dark chocolate streak the inner spines of all the books. Words are drugs. Love is a drug, while Europe contracts into dark burgundy upholstery and cushions. Deep in the French-English dictionary, 3 asterisks mark extreme vulgarity. How long can we stay here? Outside, the new homeless twist dreadlocks and pace their mastiffs. Tattoos bulge on their forearms. Paper wrappers and crushed cans clot the gutter. Sun leaps off the roof tiles. A brisk sea wind. In the mountains, those small purple flowers with pods and curling tendrils, now you tell me, were vetch. I love that word. So I'll end with these 2. Toward High Point. Following you westward along the steep ridge trail in January, I step in your snow-crisped tracks on oak and beech leaf parchment. The waterfall careers down among umbers and blacks of ice-filigreed rock, past tattered moss, polishing the shale cliff to a dark gloss. Old mountains these, wearing and worn. Through tree trunks, the edge of the gorge appears, and the opposite ridge, bristling with spruce and thorn, and beyond, the valley, and the reservoir's tarnished sheen, and still farther hills gathering bluish weight as the sky pales. Through many seasons now, I've followed you along this path. With your camera, you've snapped thousands of scenes, and I've sketched the view from the lookout boulder to the opposite ledge wrapped in ice or greenly fringed. But how to cram a mountain in a pad or photo album? At home in the cabin, we'll find our sweet routine, supper with avocados overripe, canned fish, your cabbage stew, wine to bless this peace. As we putter toward sleep, I'll take time off my wrist and lay it on the bureau, while with each tick the alarm clock heaves us over a stile. For now, we stride on an ancient seafloor, thrust to the sky. We swing along, pressing old damage down under our tread. Leaves crackle, and we trust the mountain to hold us. But how dark you've grown, heading into the sunset, a silhouette fringed in snowlight, gilt-edged and violet. end with this one. Glaucoma. Garnet flashes in the wild turkey's wattle as late sun singes the far edge of the meadow. Lacework bird calls unravel little by little into a frayed cat's cradle for catching shadow. Ceremonial as bishops in their jerking strut, the turkeys process into the transept of white pines, up the slope where the millefeuille shale lies shut in an ancient book, all scribbled between the lines. The yellow fungus arrays its party dress over petticoat and flounces. It dreams of rot. The stream, silver-tongued, has more to discuss as day grows tired and changes the subject, but only in highlights now and undertone. The black bear on our walk gave me a hard look, then lolloped up the hill this afternoon, melting into the grove of beeches across the brook. We're all melting. This house is not our own. Daily, my vision fails. What will it be, no longer to stare at bronze beech leaves strewn on the loamy floor, at the stream's currency, not to see the pearled, shadowless dawn unspool the field? At the edge of the pond, a single heron stood, a hieroglyph. I don't know what he spelled. And Diana's last look, just days before she died, enlarged by disease and sleeplessness, her eyes searched mine as if across a no man's land, and as if, by gazing, she could memorize my face. I gazed back, wordless, stroking her hand. Evening has settled now in the apple boughs. The turkeys have gone. A half moon chalks the sky. The stream keeps lisping the only story it knows, and a loosened cobweb veils the moon's eye. Thank you very much. Thank you.